Well, good morning, Fountain of Life. My name is Nylen. I am one of the associate pastors here, and I just want to welcome you into this time that we're going to be doing a message now. I get to preach right now, and so I'm super excited about that. Dr. G, as many of you know, has been holding it down ever since COVID hit. He's been preaching every week on this new format, which is the first time for me ever doing, so I'm blown away by how he's doing this every week. And he, as most of you know, if you come to FWell, he has been on sabbatical most Augusts, and this year I don't think he's taking off during August, but we're working to still let him take his preaching time off in August. So Reverend Laleta kicked it off last week at our outdoor service. If you weren't there, it was a powerful, powerful message. You can go and look on YouTube at the earlier week, and you can watch it. It was an incredible message, just so full of transparency and power. I encourage you to watch it. But for the rest of us, myself, I was going to be preaching. Pastor Kevin's going to be preaching. Eric Porter's going to be preaching. Minister Harry Hawkins is going to be preaching. And then Sister Shawn Washington is going to be preaching. And so we are so thrilled that each of us get to come and bring a word. And what Pastor actually shared is that we are getting to bring whatever it is that the Lord has laid on our hearts and our spirit as an encouragement to you, as an encouragement to our people. And so in some ways that's exciting. In some ways that's like, okay, this could be anything. And so what I have sensed is that I've sensed that God has given me a message, and it is dealing with something that is extremely personal for me and deals with my story in my life. So this is me sharing my heart with you. And it starts with about a year ago. Right now, I was doing really well. I felt like things were going really well in my life. You know, those times when just things are like, okay, yeah, we're moving through things are good. And I wasn't prepared for the season that I was going to be stepping into. You see, from the end of August, so right at the end of what would be this month right here, from the end of August through the end of January, I went through 6 of the hardest months of my life. And what I went through and what I struggled with in particular was mental health struggles. I started to face debilitating depression, spiraling anxiety, and paralyzing fear. And it was a time when I felt like I couldn't see a way forward. I was struggling with my sense of call as a pastor. I was struggling with just worries about how life was going to work out. I was worried about financial pieces. I was worried about so many different things were coming together in my life. That was so difficult. And it felt like it was all happening to me. And as a result, I was in a place where I entered into deep despair and darkness in my spirit and in my heart, and it was a really hard time for me, those 6 months. And in a similar way, I think our world wasn't really prepared. Just how I said, a year ago, I didn't know I was about to step into one of the hardest moments of my life. A year ago, we had no idea what would be happening right now. We were in a different world, different situation, and no one would have thought of what we were going to step into. And the result, oftentimes when that happens, is anxiety, fear, depression. We're seeing a lot of difficult emotions coming up at this time. And then I don't know if you've experienced those in this time or just in general, but we can go through those times of anxiety, fear, depression, and a lot of us know what that feels like. A lot of us know when it feels like that dark night of the soul where it's just, I don't know how I'm going to go forward. I don't sense my purpose. I struggle to feel like there's something for me here. And so if that's how you're feeling in this moment, if that's how our world's feeling and all that, we're going to take a look at a passage today that talks about that. We're looking at 1 Kings 19 and a story with Elijah the prophet, and Elijah's story of battling with darkness and even depression and feeling purposelessness. And so that's what we're jumping into today. So I'm going to start off here. And you know, the big thing that I want us to think through as well is there's going to be three main words. They all start with C. I'm sorry, I don't mean to alliterate like that, but they just work perfectly. Is that we're going to learn how we combat these things, or how we just journey through these things more than combat, journey through composure. So next one is curiosity, and then lastly, through courage. And so as we begin today, I'm going to look and share a little bit about the context of the passage. Thank you, Layla Yates, for reading for me. It was fantastic. She is wonderful job reading. So thank you, Layla. And as we jump in, I'm going to read the first two verses here, and we'll just keep going. So it says, "Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. And so Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, 'May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them.'" All right, so context. What's going on? All right, we have three characters. Ahab, who is the king of Israel, all right? King of Israel. Jezebel is a queen who is the one who makes things happen. We'll just say it that much. She's the one that really runs the show. And then Elijah, the prophet. And what's happened in the prior passage, as you can tell, there's something that went on here, is that it's one of those famous passages where Elijah called down fire from God to prove that God was a God who heard and responded and was the true God. Whereas Baal, who is a false god that rivaled Israel at that time, this is a god that a lot of Israelites were following that they should not be following. False god. And there was a lot of prophets for Baal who were trying to do this display of work, and it became clear that God was the true God and Baal wasn't. Baal was actually nothing. And so in the middle of that, Elijah slaughters these prophets, and Jezebel in response, Jezebel who's been following, who's committing all these evil acts, who's committing injustices, but also leading people astray into following someone other than God. She says, "I'm going to kill this guy." And she puts a bounty on his head, and like, if it's not happening tomorrow, you're dead. So that's the context surrounding. And honestly, Elijah responds with probably a fairly natural response, which is terror, which is fear in the middle of this. The queen, the one who makes things happen in this thing, has put a bounty on my head, and because of what I've done, is trying to kill me. And so as it says, he was afraid, and he ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, it's a southernmost town in Israel, he left his servant there, and while he went into the wilderness, he went pursuing the wilderness, and the purpose of that is he came to a bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I don't know if you've ever gotten to those points, as we mentioned earlier, where we get to those super dark moments of despair where we end up in a wilderness where things get so unbearable, where things feel like they're just, that's a lot of how anxiety feels. It can feel like, and we just get filled with this terror, this paralyzing fear or emotion. I like to describe it as spirals, or it feels like waves that come against us and paralyze us. If you've had panic attacks, or if you've struggled with that, you know what that feels like. And perhaps for some people who are experiencing this pandemic and it's causing a lot more fear than normal, or there's been resources that maybe were always counted on or are struggling, or whatever it is going on, perhaps you're feeling this for the first time. Or perhaps you're beginning to feel these emotions and you've never struggled with them that way before. We get to these places where it can just feel overwhelming, where life feels like it's coming in all around us. And our response, whether it's exactly as Elijah has it, which is he asked to die, or if we just get to that place of despair where we don't know what to do anymore, we can get to that just lost. And this passage here also talks about how it says, when he decides that, he says, "Take my life, I am no better than my ancestors." And so a lot of negative self-talk. And let me share a little bit about an image that describes how this felt like for me. last year. As I mentioned, I had a lot of things going on. I had financial issues, relationship issues. I had this and this and this and this and this and this and this. Felt no sense of call towards ministry, which didn't make any sense to me. I've always felt such a strong call towards pastoral ministry and to pursuing what God has. And for some reason, it just felt empty. I felt empty everywhere. And an image that I'll come back to later, but this is what it felt like to me. It felt like I was in a forest, a super wooded forest, dark, like everything everywhere. I'm in the middle of it at night. There's no lights anywhere. I'm lost, and I have no idea where I'm supposed to go or what I'm supposed to do to get out of it. That's how it felt. It felt so burdensome, and the wilderness is such a great metaphor for it because it feels like Israel was lost in the wilderness for so long. We get lost in these wilderness places. And sometimes those wildernesses are a long time. These seasons of wilderness can last for a long time. For me, it actually, before things started to make some turns, and I just felt hopeless, that was at least 4 to 5 months for me, which, from what I've heard, can be even a short time frame. So if you're in one of those times right now, it can be hard, and it can be a long time. That season can feel overwhelming, and it can feel like it's never going to go away. I know for a fact, I told my parents this, I told my friends this, I kept saying for so long, I will never get better. I am always going to feel this way. And we're going to get to this, but I can promise you that that's not true. That seasons can continue. Seasons, we don't know when they come, but we also don't know when they end. They work through in different ways, and so seasons aren't always going to feel like moments of despair. That's why we hold on. But I want you to know it can be difficult, and if you know someone who's going through one of those, it can be so, so difficult. And for Elijah here, he does something that I was all too familiar with. He worst case scenarios this, and he speaks so negatively to himself. Can you relate with me on this? And can we relate to Elijah? Elijah's just like, hey, I take my life, I am no better than my ancestors. It's this negative self-talk, like I'm nothing, I suck, I'm no better than this. And that's what I would do to myself. I would speak such negative things to myself. I would say, Tyler, you're a horrible pastor. You'll never be able to pastor. Tyler, you are a horrible man who can't just who struggles with being in relationship with people or being able to work out things with people or just so much negativity. You'll never have purpose. You'll never have it, and it's just like once you start to enter into that, it can be so hard to get out of it. It is overwhelming. And when we get in those cycles of negative self-talk and when we talk to ourselves, it's hard. I don't know if you experience that, and I want you to think, what are the tapes that you play over and over in your head that you say, I'm nothing to? I'm not good enough for this. God isn't going to do this for me. God, you've created me wrong. I want you to think through what those things are and to recognize it's so debilitating, and it's not how God would talk to us. It is not in any way how God would talk to us. It ties in with this next point here, which is composure. How do we compose ourselves when we get in these situations? When we get to these places of despair? Because the reality is that, like I mentioned in the image of the forest, right? Being lost in the forest, not knowing where to go, panicking. And I could see myself shrieking and screaming and crying out. This image came to me one time when I was sitting in, it was on one of my darkest days of despair, of feeling like I was lost and I was never gonna get better. I was sitting at a coffee shop. It's a place where I meet God all the time and where God really speaks to me. And all of a sudden, like, I'm not a person that thinks in visions or images or things like that. That's just not how I usually go. But it was like God revealed this to me consistently over and over. And so I just started writing. I'm lost. It feels like I'm lost in the woods. It feels like I'm in this thick, dark forest. And so all of these feelings started to think about how it's going. And literally, I was like watching myself shrieking and screaming and crying out and just looking for anything. And so what was freeing about that is because it was able to help me in my head go, all these ways that you're talking about yourself, like we talked about with Elijah, like you're bad, you're awful. You would never say that to someone in that situation. Like if you saw someone in a forest shrieking and panicked and lost and not knowing where to go, would you ever come up to them and go, yeah, you really suck. You really have no idea where to go, do you? You got lost big time, didn't you? Sucks to be you. Like, you suck. Would you really say that to someone? No. Like, you would never speak that way to someone in that situation. So why do we do that to ourselves? Why are we not able to look at ourselves compassionately? Why are we not able to look at ourselves the way that God might look at us? So, yeah, we need to get into a place of composure, because in that image that I talked about, it was like I couldn't be ready to move forward until I learned how to compose myself. Like if you're lost in the woods and you're panicking and shrieking and crying and you're lost in this moment of despair, you're not gonna be able to move. You're not gonna be able to take a wise step. You're not gonna be able to figure out where you need to go. And you're also not gonna be ready to hear if someone's calling out to you and sharing with you where you're supposed to go. We need to figure out how to compose ourselves in the middle of these things. And so what happens with Elijah here in verses 5 through 9a is it says this, all at once, all of a sudden, an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. And then he looked around. By his head there was bread and water, so he ate, and then he drank some water, and then lay down again and took a nap. Now, let me tell you, sometimes in order to gain composure, you need a snack and a nap. It's like the Snickers commercial. Sometimes when you are hangry, or when you are struggling, or when you are going through some darkness, you need a snack and a nap, because we need to address our basic physical needs that sometimes we've worn ourselves down on. And so also, by the way, if you have a friend who you know is going through something, and let's say they have like certain specific responsibilities, whether it's kids or whether it's this or that, offer them 2 hours, give them $10, buy a snack, take a nap, come back in 2 hours. I handle it. That is a way to help a friend who's going through some darkness and some difficulty. Because snacks and naps, God can use a snack and a nap anytime you want. Just remember that. That is key. Snack and nap. And so God comes in this first way and just basically gives him some sort of relief. That's the big piece that we have here. When we're going through the darkness and the despair, and it's been so long, we need some sort of relief in order to just be like, oh, I can breathe again. And so that happens, and then a second time he comes in the passage, and God says, hey, like, you're not strong enough for this journey. This is the big piece. Like, you need to compose yourself. You need to get into a place where you are going to be strong enough for the journey to even come talk to me, to have a conversation. That's the piece that Elijah gets to, right, is he goes to hear a word from the Lord. But he's not ready because he hasn't composed himself. How are we in need of composing ourselves? How are we in need of taking the relief and taking the rest that we need in order to be able to be in a place where we're able to receive what God has for us? But here's the thing. The big question is, how can we regain composure by following or receiving what God has? So like I've said, what I needed to do and what ended up happening for me, how I ended up doing some composure and gaining composure and letting the Lord speak to me is that aside from snacks and naps, which were great, I was able to reinstill the idea of Sabbaths. These holy places where we accept God's grace. Because oftentimes we don't even, we will push away what God has for us when he's trying to give us ways out, when he's trying to give us ways that are gonna build us. We'll say, nope, someone else is doing worse than me, so I can't stop my work because someone else is doing worse. Or what if someone at my work thinks that I'm weak or I'm lame? Or what if I'm not pressing hard enough? Maybe I just need to press harder into this, and that's my issue. When in reality, God's just trying to compassionately give you a place where you can regain composure. For me, I had to go spend a week with one of my best friends in Louisville. And then I had 2 other sort of times after that where I was able to spend some time relaxing and resting and receiving breath and a breather and being able to compose myself with people who knew me well and who loved me. And that might not be what you are able to do in this time. You may have responsibilities or places where that might not be realistic for you to do that. But what is it you can do to give yourself rest and relief? Because God longs for that for you. He longs for it. And another place that I think for me that I want to make very clear is something that can be really helpful. And it's not just about, sometimes we enter into mental states or have mental health issues where we need some help outside ourselves. That can make use of the gifts and the knowledge that God has given doctors and therapists and those things. So for me, I went to therapy, and I still go to therapy because it was helpful for me to figure out and to look. And we'll get to the next piece that will help make sense of that. But I also ended up on medicine. I'm on antidepressants, and they're wonderful because I was in such a stuck place that some of the relief, I didn't want to go on some sort of medication or something like that because I was like, God, I don't want that. I don't want to be a person who needs to rely on this or that. I just want to be able to figure it out. I want to be okay. And the whole time, it was almost like me rejecting what God was doing and saying, hey, I created these doctors and these people who have a gift and who are going through this. And also remember, like, your family history has this in your family. For me, it was depression. Like, that's part of your family history. That's okay. Like, I worked through that. In fact, I'm going to work through that powerful enough so that you can impact other people on it. Sometimes we have to go through these things, but medication, for me, has been really helpful. And so I want to make sure that I'm not saying that to go through these battles, we can't look at options and resources outside of ourselves, because in some ways, sometimes that's the relief that God gives us so that we're able to have composure. Through those sort of things, the retreats, the rest, the focusing, the meds and all that, it helped me gain composure for myself so that I could get to a place now where I could hear God better, where I could make wise decisions, where I could be prepared to receive. And so that's what happens here with Elijah. I do want to say specifically, can you have compassion on yourself? Can you have compassion on yourself? Because so many of us don't. And God doesn't want that for you. God wants you to know how much he loves you. And God wants you to understand that having compassion on yourself is something he wants you to have. That he does not want you hating yourself. He does not want you replaying old tapes. He does not want you to speak so negatively to yourself. God wants you to be free. And he wants you to sense compassion for yourself, not just for others, even though will you allow yourself to let God show up for you and give you relief that he's asking you to give? Or are we going to keep stiff-arming him until we get further and further down the road? Elijah could have said no to this food, and it would have kept putting him further and further in the hole. The more we reject the compassion of God and the relief he's trying to give us, the further down we keep going. Are you willing to accept that? Are we willing to accept the compassion that God has and that we can have for ourselves? So the next piece that comes out from that, flowing out of that compassionate nature that gives us ability to have composure, to get to a place where we can kind of be healthy again and where we can begin to hear God, we have to ask the question now, how are we able to be curious? What curiosity do we need to have? And so in the next section, verses 9b to 13a, the big question that God asks, it starts off with once he gets to the mountain of God, he gets to the place where he knows that God can speak, and it says the word of the Lord came to him. What are you doing here, Elijah? Now the way I say it is what I just said it actually isn't the way I think it should be, but it's the question, what are you doing here, Elijah? And I think this question is full of curiosity of God. It's making Elijah probe into his own mind and his own self and ask the question, what brought me here? What got me here? And I don't think that this is something that's full of a shaming question. Like sometimes we can read an authority figure asking us a question like this, and it's like, what did you do to get here? Why are you here? What are you doing? I don't think that's how God's asking this. I think he's inviting Elijah in and saying, what are you doing here, Elijah? What brought you to this point? Let's engage curiously. So these incidents and these places these places where God shows up and asks these questions, it's meant to help us to think, how did I get here? What brought me to this position? What may have been a place or a posture or something that was going on in my life that brought me to this despair? Because oftentimes we like to think that everything happens to us. And sometimes it does. It really can. But then we do have the power to figure out how we respond and how we work through things. And so the question is, what brought you to the place of despair that you're at? What is it that's happened? Whether it's something that happened to you and we can begin to think through and process that and be curious enough to wrestle with that, to work through it. Or is it something that we've been allowing to happen because we think things just happen to us rather than knowing that we have power that God has given us to take control of our situations. Not all situations, I'm not saying that anything, I'm trying to make those 2 points here, but that for me in particular, very strongly for me, I was allowing my life and my situations to dictate me rather than allowing God and God's word and God's heart for me dictate how my life was going on. And so how do we be curious? And I think we'll, as we continue to move to the next one, we'll think about what that means. But Elijah responds to that question. And he says this, he says, I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. So he responds with this response that is actually pretty self-woeing, like I'm the only one left. I've been so zealous for you. I've been doing all these things for you, God. I'm just continually doing all this, and I'm the only one left. And we're about to find out that may not actually be true. But it has to be a place that we start because we have to share where we're honestly at with God. We have to be able to say how we're feeling because that's how God can do his work. That's what allows us the opportunity, because if he doesn't say anything, God can't work with him. But as we're about to find out, God continually moves and works with him. And so it's not about being right, it's about being honest with God. Because God will transform us the more we have honesty with him, because he has something to work with at that point. And next what happens is that there's the story of how God shows up, and God shows up through what we usually call a silent whisper, a gentle whisper. The words that are in Hebrew talk about it being like the stillness of like this silence, complete silence. And it's in contrast to this wind which comes, which often is associated with the false god Baal. And so this wind comes and it says, God's not with that. And then the fire comes and this earthquake comes, and that's how God had appeared to people like Moses. And sometimes God doesn't always appear to you or to individuals the same way he appeared to heroes or people who we respect or have gone before. And so this case moves on past that. And we get to this whisper, and a lot of people focus on that. I don't want to focus on that today because in the middle of when that happens, what happens is that Elijah comes out to God again, and God asks the question for the second time. Elijah, what are you doing here? How'd you get here? What brought you here? But this time, I think there's something about it that, mixed with the curiosity piece, also asks for the question of purpose. What are you doing here? What is your purpose here? What is it that you have? What is it that I have for you in the middle of this? And I think what we need to face that with is courage. So that curiosity piece is huge because we have to have the courage to be curious enough to really answer that question. When we get to the point of thinking, what are we doing here? How did we get here? And what are we doing here? Where are we going as a result of being here, of being in this moment where we meet God? What happens? And for Elijah, he says the exact same response. That's what's so interesting is he says the exact same response. And I think the response that God has to that is where the courage piece comes in, where we can learn to lean into courage. Because Elijah, again, is honest, but God calls him on his place and how he was wrong and how what he continued to view as his obstacle wasn't necessarily his obstacle. See, when it goes on here, again, I'm the only one here. The Lord speaks to him, and it says, go back the way you came. Ooh, that is a terrifying phrase from God. That is a terrifying order from God, because back the way he came, that's the place where the fear is. That's the place where the pain is. That's where the struggle is. What do you mean go back the way you came? It's because God is giving him the knowledge and insight, and to say that he has to have the courage, because God does not want Elijah, and he's not going to have the power of God display himself if he runs away, if he avoids it. See, that's the thing. We like to avoid our places of pain. We like to avoid our places of fear. We like to turn away from it. We like to run away from our places of fear. But what God is calling us to do is to look at those places of fear, those places of pain, those places of despair, and those situations that we are able to ask with curiosity and say, what was it that got me here? What situations were the ones that brought me to this place? What places brought me here? And he wants to transform them. He wants his power to be made manifest through that place of pain, through that place of fear, through that place of despair. Because for Elijah, he thought it was all good. He didn't think it was all good. He thought he was the only one. And God reveals in this that not only are you not the only one, but I got 7,000 people who are mine, who have not kneeled. You think you're the only one? Get with the program. You think you're the only one? You think that I am not good enough to bring you through this? You think that I haven't been working on all these things? In fact, the person you interacted with the chapter before, or 2 chapters before, there's a guy named Obadiah. Take a look. He was saving people and protecting people from within the king's household. And Elijah didn't know about it. Sometimes you don't know what God's doing. You have no idea. You could interact with the exact people who are helping achieve God's mission and not know it. God wants us to address where we've come from. That phrase again, I'll just say it again, go back the way you came. Pastor talks about this all the time when he's talking about white allies, and he's talking about white individuals who want to learn about racism and who want to grow in their allyship or their solidarity, all this. And he says, until you begin to understand the history of how we got here, until we look back, and until you go back the way you came, we're never going anywhere. You will not go anywhere on this because you haven't addressed what has happened to get here. You haven't been curious enough and courageous enough to look at it with real eyes, with real truth. And so that's what we do. That's what God calls us to. He names it in Elijah. He says, I know your fear. You think you're alone? We're going to go through that. For me, I had to name what I was struggling with. For me, I was struggling with something called codependency, is where I wasn't okay unless every single other person around me was okay. I wasn't myself because I thought, as long as everyone else is okay, it doesn't matter who I am or what I got going on here or whether I'm okay. As long as everyone else is good, that's where I find my worth and my value and identity. And that is just a lie. And I have had to deconstruct that so often in my head. And I've had to create pathways and challenge through really strong, courageous acts that probably don't seem courageous to most people, but they have been courageous for me because I have patterned my whole life around being codependent. And so what's crazy now is by getting to that lowest point, that point where I was nowhere, I learned what it meant to be compassionate to myself. I've learned what it means to struggle and to need to have the courage to be curious enough to look at myself and to say, this is why I'm here. This is what has gone on in my life, and these are the ways I have not trusted you, God. I have not trusted who you've created me to be. We have to go back to those places. If you have places where you have patterned yourself, where you continually get to the same space, if you have habits that you continually keep ending up in the same spot, if you have places that continue to produce anxiety and fear and depression, God wants to heal that in you, and he wants to transform it in you. He does not want to avoid it. He does not want to run from it, but he wants to look at you in the middle of that and say, I am powerful enough to transform that in you. Do you believe that your God is who that is, and that your God has never left you? Through this whole story with Elijah, let me tell you, God keeps showing up. And he keeps inviting, he keeps pursuing, he keeps offering relief, he keeps offering his voice, he shows up. And the reality is, though, as much as Elijah may not have always had things perfect, he responded to it. Elijah was willing to look at the situations and take the invitations of God. He took the bread, he took the relief that he needed. He's willing to take these things. And so in the middle of whatever it is that we go through, it is really easy for us to reject God or to think that he's not present, when in reality, we aren't listening, or we aren't being willing to just accept what he is doing. He is continually pursuing. I thought for those 6 months of deep depression that he was gone, he was lost, he didn't care about me. I found out that he loved me more than anyone else ever could, because he wasn't going to let me continue to stay in patterns of codependency. He was going to let me get and choose to get to my lowest point so that he could transform me through his power. That it wasn't about me, but it was through his power. And you know what? He can do that for you too. We have to let him. We have to have composure. We have to get to a place where we can be composed by accepting the compassionate grace that God gives us. We have to get to a place of curiosity where we can look at it, look at what we're dealing with. And we have to get to a place of courage where we're courageous enough to look at where we came from, but courageous enough to move forward. Because for Elijah, he said, I am not done with you yet. I got missions for you to go do. It's the end of the chapter there. Or, I have missions for you. I have something for you to do. Now go do it. Not through your own power, but through me. Today, and as we continue to move forward here, in the midst of seasons of depression and darkness and anxiety and places where we have no idea what to do, let's move forward courageously, composed, with curiosity.